Okay. Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming today. My name is Lori Waters, and this is Lika CTC. We're part of the Active Transportation Program team at California Transportation. And this is our first, what we call our branch workshop for the 2025 Active Transportation Program. And for those of you that don't know what that is, we do two kinds of workshops. And we do central workshops and branch workshops. And central workshops are when we meet with the whole stakeholder group all around the state, and we make revisions to the guidelines and the application and the scoring rubrics. But a branch workshop is very exciting that we're here because this whole concept started here in Tulare County. A couple cycles ago in 2019, right?
Yes.
Okay, 2019. We had done an analysis of the cycle before and of how areas of the state were doing. And through this analysis, we realized that Tulare County was not performing as well as it should in the program. But we couldn't figure out why because, you know, there's a lot of disadvantaged communities, a lot of things that should make the communities here do well in the program. So we got together with TKI and we decided that we would, you know, provide some extra help here. So we came to Tulare County twice in 2019 and we did a workshop, which we are now call them branch workshops. And we did a central workshop and we did site visits. And you'll see when Alika does her presentation, you'll see that it was very useful. So what a branch workshop is that we realize that there are parts of the state that, you know, aren't into what goes on in Sacramento or whatever as other spots. People do really their regular jobs. So we decided we needed to get out to the various places in the state to just do more outreach on the program itself. You know, some education and some more personalized help on how various areas can do better in the program. And so we keep these just to this area. You know, we have to, we notice these, so don't we have to notice them, but it's mostly for you. And this is the place that you can ask any questions that you might have about the program, even if it's as basic as you might think. Go ahead, this is the place to do that. We're here to help you. We want this to be more of a conversation. We do enough presentations that we do prefer to have more of a conversation with you. So I think what we should do first is do introductions in the room, and we have a few people online. Yeah. So why don't we start with you, Russ? Just tell us who you are and where you're from.
Okay. I'm from Lake Tahoe and here. And I've been involved with these ATP grants for 10 years probably, and I'm a member of that Active Transportation Committee here.
Vicki Riddle, I represent Exeter, I'm City Councilwoman. I'm on TCAG, and I just thank you so much for having me down here. It's been a joy to work with Sheila and Derek, and it's my first go around to ATP, so I'm excited.
Good.
ATP, so thank you.
Okay.
Eddie Went, also at the City of Exeter, getting us extra help, helping them with getting some bicycle pedestrian facilities within the city. It's used to work with Tulare County and TK for 20-some years. Doing like planning.
Great.
Pedro Ordonez, I'm with Tulare County Army.
Julian Sanchez, also Tulare County Engineering Department.
Carla Diego, also with Tulare County, I'm one of the analysts.
I'm Leslie Blair, City of Visalia engineer, and I'm looking forward to getting feedback today.
Yo Correa, Civil Engineer of the City of Visalia.
Denise England, Grants and Resources Manager for the County of Tulare.
Jennifer Reynolds, I'm with the City of Woodley.
Community Development, City of Woodley.
I'm Mark Wall, I'm chairman of the Active Transportation Advisory Committee for TCAG. I'm the advocacy chair for Southern Sierra Cyclists Local Bike Club. And I head up an LCI group of about 10 people here in the county. And I worked in public transit for 39 years. So bikes and buses are my things.
My name's Gary Wills. I'm a chief planner with Tulare County. Add on to the
Ali Yates, I'm with Tulare County Resource Management Agency. Sheila Robier, I'm original planner at TCAG.
Eric Winning, I'm with TCAG also.
Then TCAG, and I would just say I was there in 2019 when we did the site visits and the workshop. We thought we had a pretty good story to tell back then. And when they came out and we walked the sites, I think that came across really well. I think they really saw what we were trying to explain as far as the need for these facilities and how it would help and what we could get accomplished for their goals and our goals. But what we also learned from doing that is what the shortfalls were on the TCAG side for telling that story in the applications. And so by walking the sites with them, and while they're hearing the story from us, we're also getting feedback from them on very specific things on these sites, specific things that we should do to strengthen our applications. And so we're hoping that that continues this year, this week, as we're at those sites, really listening to what the CTC is telling us. They're very good at this, but also from our own side, how can we tell our story the best possible way? So this is a really great week.
Yeah. So it looks like we have a couple attendees online. Could you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves, please?
I'll go first, I guess. I'm George Avila with the city of Dinuba.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Ridenour with the city of Porterville.
Luisa Zavala with the city of Porterville.
Araceli Mejia with the city of Lindsay.
Mario Anaya with the city of Tulare.
Steve Martinez, city of Tulare.
Stephen Sopp, city of Tulare.
I'm Beverly Neiman Burkhardt. I'm with the CTC. I'm the other member of the ATP team. Hello, everyone.
So I thought of two things when Ben was talking. First, I neglected to thank TCAG for having us here and for planning all this. We can't do these workshops and these site visits without the help of the APO. They kind of bring everybody together for us. So yeah, they're big help. And I wanted to ask, was anybody else other than Ben here when we were here in 2019? Yeah, a couple people look a little familiar. Okay, so, but most of you are either new or new to the program, so that's great. Okay, I'm done for now, and I will jump in here and there, but I'll turn over to Alika.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, so before I dive into the presentation, for the attendees that are online, if you could just come off mute if you have a question or comment, and just feel free to interrupt me. I unfortunately won't be able to pan between the presentation and the Zoom profile or platform, so please feel free to stop me at any point.
Yeah, and like I said, we really want this to be a conversation, so at any time, if stop us, ask us a question, ask us to clarify, please do that. It is not helpful to us or you if we just sit here and present to you, because we know all this stuff. So, this is for you. So please take advantage of us being.
Okay. I got it figured out. Okay, sorry.
Do you need help?
No, I got it. I got it. Okay. So As Lori mentioned, this is our first branch workshop for the 2025 ATP. Okay, so starting off with the program goals, you'll see here we have each one listed. Those are increasing walking and biking, increasing safety of non-motorized users, to help regional agencies meet their SB 375 goals, to enhance public health, to ensure disadvantaged communities fully share in the benefits of the program, and to provide a broad spectrum of projects and projects to benefit the users. So one thing that we just wanted to highlight is enhancing public health. This is something that you'll see kind of mirrored in the application. So keep that in mind as I go throughout this and focus more on some of the questions later on throughout my presentation. So for the program structure, this is a competitive funding program, and the funds are distributed amongst 3 ATP components. So 50% of those funds go to the statewide component, and the statewide is open to all applicants. The next is 10% for the small urban and rural component. And following that is 40% for the metropolitan planning organizations, or the MPO component. So TCAG this Tulare region used to fall under the 40% metropolitan planning organization component. However, Tulare now falls under the 10% small urban and rural. So the 40% covers the remaining large MPOs. So once an application is submitted, it goes into the statewide component. If it is not selected for funding in the statewide component, if it falls within one of the large MPOs, it goes into the metropolitan planning organization component. And if it's in the smaller urban or more rural community, then it'll fall into the 10% small urban.
What's the population threshold that covers it?
I could explain this.
Yeah.
It's a census issue. It's not the CTC thing. Previously, they counted Visalia and Tulare and Farmersville and Exeter as one urban area. They no longer count Tulare and Visalia together, so that became 2 separate MPOs. And none of them combined, we had over 200,000, which is the threshold for medium. But now neither Visalia nor Tulare by themselves meets the 200,000. Although Visalia is getting pretty close, it'll probably cross over a couple of years. So it's the way that they define how they do the boundaries, and it's shook out this way for us because of how they drew previously.
How many other agencies?
I think it was 2 or 3 nationwide. Very few, or one of very few that were impacted by it.
So in California, Santa Barbara moved into the large MPO. You guys moved out, they moved in. Now, this may sound like not a good thing, but I think it is actually going to be better for you, and I'll tell you why. So being in the large MPO component, you do get a set amount, like, because that 40% is split up amongst the 10 large MPOs, but it's split up by population. So Tulare County didn't get very much. I don't know how much Sheila did.
About 2 million.
Yeah, okay, so it wasn't very much. So it's a guaranteed amount. And then what would happen is, what Sheila will submit her MPO recommendations. And so, you would get a set amount of that 2 million. On the other hand, in the small urban and rural, if every single project in the small urban and rural, if the highest scoring ones are all from Tulare County, you could get that whole 10% pot. So you have access to more funds if you do well. And Tulare County the agencies within Tulare County did quite well last cycle. So if you do well again, you'll probably be better off in the smaller urban rural. So you don't have a guaranteed amount, but you have access to a larger amount of funds.
We think of it like we got kicked off the high school basketball team, but now we're playing in the little kids league. And we're just demolished that.
Yeah.
But we're still 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
Good one.
I just have a quick question. Would it be an equity issue if Tulare County region like sweeps off all of the 10%? Like, you know, like.
No, I mean, there would be a lot of people not happy, but, but we go, in the ATP, we go by score. And if the highest scoring projects are all in Visalia, then, you know, it's possible every project could be in Visalia. It's just the way it works. It doesn't end up being that way. But I will say last cycle in the small and rural, it was dominated by the Central Coast. They did much better than anyone else. But Santa
That's part of the
Barbara.
good news, right?
Yeah.
Santa Barbara, our biggest competition,
Yeah.
is now not
Now,
our competition.
yeah, and Santa Cruz had a couple very large projects, but because those got funded last time, I doubt that they'll have much that they submit this time. They're gonna be busy with their projects, so it'll, in the long run, it's probably gonna be better.
We think so. We have one concern though. We did tend to use that MPO component for, well, we really tried to fund projects in our unincorporated communities or, you know, small communities, places that are harder to get a higher score. But like you guys pointed out, if we put good applications together, we have a chance to get much more than the 2 million we would have automatically.
For the record, I'm an advocate for local funding control. But that's what it is.
What is that?
Give us the percentage, give us the breaking up by share.
We think we can do better than the 2 million though.
How much are you talking, 10%?
We're getting there.
Yeah.
That's a good question, but we're.
I
think it's my next slide, I promise.
Will you be discussing how the scoring, who does the scoring?
Yeah, we can, whatever you know, we have a basic presentation, but then the rest of the time is just whatever you want to hear about.
Yeah, I can actually cover the application process and evaluation process when we get to slide 4.
Just to clarify, since we no longer do the large MPO, so on the application, there's a question that says, are you part of the large MPO? Now we say
Small mineral.
no. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the average income in Santa Barbara? I can look into
Yeah,
that.
I can Google it.
Because I mean, with every town we have, I noticed we have the average income with every town. I'm curious what Santa Barbara's.
Yeah.
They have this advantage.
Just remember, they got bumped up to, we're not competing with them. Santa Cruz though. So,
Yeah. I'd like to know.
Santa Cruz.
Any other questions? Okay, so the final thing we wanted to point out on this slide is by statute, a minimum of 25% of the funds must go to or benefit disadvantaged community for each of the components. Realistically, we're looking at closer to 100% almost every cycle. That's typically what we end up funding. So this is never an area of concern in the ATP. Okay, so moving on into the application types. So we have 5 different application types. We have the infrastructure, non-infrastructure only, and plans. And the infrastructure applications are broken out into 3 categories. We have the large infrastructure only, or infrastructure with a non-infrastructure component. And a non-infrastructure is basically just adding an education or encouragement program in addition to the infrastructure project that you're looking to build. So for the large infrastructure or infrastructure, non-infrastructure, these are projects with a total project cost of greater than 10 million. This is something that was discussed during the central workshop process for cycle 7. It was agreed that we would leave these thresholds for the large, medium, and small applications. However, as you'll see, the first bullet there has an asterisk. This may change, we highly doubt it, but you know, if commissioners do raise some concerns, that is the only instance that we foresee that changing. For the large applications, we also wanted to make sure it's known that you may apply for pre-construction phases only, but only in the large application. Moving on to the medium infrastructure or infrastructure, non-infrastructure. These are total project costs of greater than 3.5 million and up to 10 million. And small infrastructure or infrastructure, non-infrastructure. This is projects with a total project cost of 3.5 million or less. As mentioned before, the non-infrastructure only applications, these are again, education, encouragement, and enforcement activities. So similar to maybe something like this that you guys do, like any sort of activities that you're doing with schools, with your community members, whether it's working in conjunction with your infrastructure project, or it'll take place after your project is completed, anything like that would qualify under non-infrastructure.
I have a quick question. Is this a new application type for this year that you can do only non-infrastructure?
No, so we've had this for a few cycles now. Was it 2019 or the fourth? Yeah. So it was the 2019 ETP cycle that this was included.
And the reason, the splitting up of the applications, like the sizes, they don't mean any, they're kind of arbitrary numbers, but the reason that we did that was, one of the criticisms, I guess, that the program kind of receives is that it's difficult, the application process is difficult and time consuming, which it is. So we've been trying to figure out ways to streamline that. So we split the infrastructure ones down so we can have 3 different types of applications. So the smaller one is at least theoretically easier. And the larger one is the most time intensive one, because you know it's more money, so you know you have to do more to get the funds. And then it also allows us to track over cycles too. So then we can see, okay, this cycle we're starting to fund way more large than small, or medium, and or more not in, you know, it just gives us more ways to track what we're funding and what agencies are applying for.
One thing I'll add to, and this is something that we sometimes hear when we're doing site visits or talking to agencies about their projects. It's really important to apply for the project that you need. So just because the small infrastructure application may seem easier to complete and fill out, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to showcase your project in the best way. So if you need to complete a large infrastructure application, go for it. It's giving you more space to talk about your project, provide community context, and discuss everything that your project is going to do and fulfill. So definitely don't shy away from going bigger if that's what your community needs.
Bigger is better.
Well, that's one of the concerns, I think, for like small unincorporated communities, whereby perhaps it's more difficult to add all the elements to a project that might make it add up to a large project. I don't know if you guys can touch on that, or.
So are the concerns that it won't be as competitive because it's smaller?
Yeah, like, is that a true statement or misconception?
Yeah, I think that's a misconception that we hear more from the rural regions. We do an analysis after every cycle just to see how many of each type of application we receive and what we actually end up funding. And they tend to come out pretty proportional. So we keep a very close eye on it just because we want to make sure that it is an equitable process. So we are very careful with that. And if we do start to notice a trend where, you know, large projects are kind of taking over and small is being, you know, not as represented in the staff recommendations, then I think we'll bring it to the larger stakeholder group to address it. but at this point, it's not a concern that it's not a trend that we're noticing.
I just kind of think about it from a scorer's perspective, not that I've been a scorer, but if you get like an application that's sidewalk project only, and then you get another application that's sidewalk project only, and a third one and a fourth one, and then the fifth one has class 4 bike lanes and a trail and crossings and transit component or something like that, right? You're likely to score that one higher just because it's got more elements, it's not as boring as the previous 3. I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at, right?
And I see where you're coming from, and I think this kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier. Almost all the projects that we get in the program, they're excellent projects. No matter the size or what they're proposing, it's really how you're showcasing the project in the application. So I think if, and I'll talk more about the evaluator process, so it'll kind of address some of the concerns that you're bringing up. But with each application, actually last time we were here and we held the branch workshop, we actually met with the city of Viola. And they were having a really difficult time because they're a really, really small community and they have absolutely no sidewalks. And they were really struggling to be successful in the ATP because they weren't talking about all of the larger issues that were surrounding the lack of infrastructure. And once they were able to showcase that, it ended up getting funded. And I think that's really the key with this program, is just making sure that you are stressing everything that you talked about, what is going on in this community? Why are these sidewalks vital? And I think that a lot of people have a soft spot for these rural communities that don't have basic infrastructure, especially when you're comparing to more urbanized areas that are looking to build, bike highways, for example. So I don't think that the small necessarily is, the small infrastructure applications are not being represented. I think as long as, and feel free to chime in, but I think as long as you're really able to talk about why this project is not only a priority for the agency, but for the community, I think it'll be really helpful in just showcasing it.
And we've done some successful small projects.
Yeah.
As well in our region, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and like Russ, who's been a evaluator for several cycles, will tell you, so what we tell evaluators, and I'm not saying that they totally don't do this, because I think that it is a natural reaction to the evaluation process, is that the applications are not really supposed to be evaluated against each other. They're evaluated on their own merits. So evaluator, if the evaluator has a project in Delano or whatever, and one in downtown LA, they shouldn't be thinking, is this one better than this one? That's not really, they're scoring it against the scoring rubrics, not against the other applications. So so it's scored on its own merits. And the one thing that, one of the biggest takeaways that we had when we were here before was that the agencies, when we went out to look at projects on site visits, the agencies tended to be splitting projects down to make them smaller. And we said, no, don't do that. If you have a community and you need sidewalks in your whole community, submit that whole thing, because that's gonna, you're gonna be able to tell a better story with that than splitting it down into pieces. Because I think sometimes people think, oh, I should, make it smaller because that'll be more competitive. But actually, what you're going for is showing the most benefits. So, if you have two projects that are close together, if they have more of a connection, put them together into one project. That's gonna, be able to show more benefits with the overall project. And then, we'll see if we have any examples of that when we're out looking at projects.
So is it encouraged, like say we do have a big project, could we submit one application for the big project, but then split it up, like apply 2 different times, right? So one large and then maybe you know, to medium applications? Is that encouraged? Do you guys, just to,
If you have the resources to do that, I don't think it hurts. We've seen some regions use that as a strategy and it's worked for them.
So was it Dynuba?
Dynuba.
Yeah,
Dynuba.
so Dynuba did that last cycle and it did and it didn't work out for them, because they submitted the big project and then they submitted small projects. And so, and they all scored really high, so they got the big project, so they actually didn't need all of the small projects, but if the big project wouldn't have scored high enough, they would have got some of the small projects, so on the other hand, there's another agency, not in the valley, that submitted 25 applications. And that, it was not a good strategy because they didn't, none of them were very good. They spread themselves way too thin.
Quality.
Yeah,
Quality.
exactly, yeah, so, yeah, you gotta think about what you can do, but the more that you can put into a really good application, the better.
You have to look at every single question.
Yeah.
And make it cover every single thing in there.
Maximize the points in every
And
section.
Photographs do not hurt.
Yeah.
Photographs don't hurt.
Okay, so before I dive into the evaluation process, I also wanted to talk about the last application type. These are plans, so these are community-wide bicycle, pedestrian, safe routes to school, or active transportation plan that encompasses disadvantaged communities. Okay, so for the evaluation process, trying to jog my memory here. Okay, so all of the evaluators that we work with are volunteers. So just quick plug before I dive into it. If you are applying for ATP, it's incredibly helpful to actually be an evaluator because you'll get a different perspective. You'll work really closely with a partner and use the scoring rubric. So it's always really, really helpful. Okay, so for the process itself, each evaluator is paired up, so it's teams of 2, and they are assigned between 9 to maybe 12 applications. The applications are vetted by Beverly very thoroughly just to ensure that there aren't any conflicts. You and your evaluator teammate would review each of the assigned applications individually, and then you would come together and come to a consensus score by question. Once you have provided commission staff all of the consensus scores for the applications that were assigned to you, commission staff along with Caltrans headquarters engineers will all meet and talk about each of the applications. So while the evaluators are doing this review process of all the ATP apps on the back end, commission staff is conducting what we call our check scores, and we are basically the base, we're like the basis where we compare our scores just to ensure consistency with the evaluator teams. And this is partly why we meet with them if we're noticing any sort of inconsistencies or if they're scoring a bit too harsh or deviating from the scoring rubrics. That's when we step in and just make sure that their scores align with the scoring rubrics. Caltrans engineers are just also looking at these applications in depth, looking at consistency, making sure the schedules are realistic, that the estimates look about right. And we discuss all of this with the evaluator teams before they provide us their final scores for each of the applications. And those are the scores that we end up using when selecting the projects. Did I miss anything?
No, that's very good. Of all the scoring I've ever done, you look at it later and 100 of them, the score I gave them, that's the score they wound up with. Maybe, yeah. I don't think there's even ever been, I think one time somebody like you called up and said, what happened to your teammates? Yeah, no, it's very, very accurate.
Yeah, we use the evaluator scores unless we, well, we do use the evaluator. So if our check score is way far off the evaluator score, we have a conversation and we see where the deviation is and have a discussion about it, and oftentimes the evaluator then will make an adjustment. It's not a perfect system. I mean, we will say that we've refined it over the cycles. But the one thing about it is it's totally transparent. You know what your score is, and you can ask for your score sheet, you can see how the score breakdown is, there's no secrets. And like Preston said earlier, we publish the scoring rubrics and everything, so you know exactly what you're being scored on, so we just put everything out there, so if you're willing to look at everything, then you're gonna get a good score.
Any questions?
I just had a comment, so, you know, it's a long-term game as well, like many of our successful applications, it was the second or third or even fourth cycle, and no doubt that the application improved along the way with lessons learned. And so what we would encourage you all to not look at the effort as wasted, right? To look at it as the down payment, if you don't get selected, as your down payment on the next cycle. So any investments in, renderings or cost estimates, other kinds of, there is an expense, right? And also an expense of time. But we really just look at it like the prize is that $5 million or $10 million award, and it's worth it to put in the effort cycle after cycle.
Yeah, and so a couple things. So we actually conducted an analysis and we found that generally it takes up to 3 cycles for an application to get funded. This is given the limited funding that we have now. If we had additional funds, things may change, but generally it takes about 3 cycles. So it is definitely worth it, as you were saying. The other is that we are tracking exactly what you said. We are tracking everyone who's been participating in our engagement process, who has been in touch with us, applying cycle after cycle. And those are really the agencies that we try to work with the most, because we know that they're trying to invest in their communities and they're putting in the time and effort to apply. So regions like Tulare are ones that we always come back to, because it's obvious you guys are investing in active transportation infrastructure.
Yeah, and the reason that it can take 3 cycles is what can happen is the first time, and Alika will get to what's gonna, this particular cycle, but the first time you apply, maybe you score 75. Unfortunately, that doesn't sound bad, but it's not nearly high enough to get funded in the ATP. So, so then you meet with us and we do a debrief on your score, because we try to debrief with everyone. And then Alika says, okay, you lost 10 points on question 2. And then we talk about it and try to see where you could have done better. And then, so the next cycle comes up, you do a site visit, you did your debrief, you do the site visit, and you score an 85. So you do better, but you're still not quite there, so we do the same thing again, and then usually with doing all that, unfortunately, it's hopefully like you said, that the effort is not wasted, because we try not to change things too much. So then doing that a couple times, then you can get the score that's needed to get funded.
Okay, so going into the eligible applicants, the ATP has a wide range of applicants here. So local, regional, or state agencies, Caltrans can apply, transit agencies, natural resources or public land agencies, public schools or school districts, tribal governments, or private nonprofit, so recreational trail funding. The program status, so this will kind of jump into cycle 7. So we anticipate approximately
555 million in funding. So that's about 100 million in about 100 million in fiscal years for each fiscal year 25-26 and 26-27, and then 117 million each in fiscal years 27-28 and 28-29. We've had 6 cycles of projects selected for funding. We have over 1,000 projects funded. Most of them provide benefits to disadvantaged communities. So as I mentioned, we're almost at 100% there, and almost 100% delivery rate. And as of right now, all of the cycle 1 projects are completed or are under construction. Pause here for a second. Did you want to add anything?
Well, so going back to the being in the MPO versus the small and medium rural. So the small and medium rural component is going to have 55.5 million in it. So now that's not guaranteed that you have access to that, as opposed to if you're in the MPO, you would only have access to the 2 million. So did you want to talk about what this is going to mean for school? Okay, so last cycle, we were very fortunate to get a one-time augmentation of funds. So we had a lot of funds last cycle. We had like 1.5 billion. And so far, we don't have that this time. We have 555.5 million. So that means that the scoring cutoff to get funded is going to be high. It's going to be a really high score. It might, we are constantly, well, Malika and Beverly are constantly doing all kinds of different analysis. And I think, Beverly, if she's listening, can correct me, that based on, if we had this amount of funding last cycle, I think the cutoff score to get funded in the statewide.
99.
Yeah, it was like it was 95 or 97 or something like that. So it's really high. And
Yeah.
But
we have a program challenges.
okay,
So we can.
Don't let that scare you though, because I mean, some of the agencies last cycle, you know, Tulare County scored like 98. So and there are some areas in the state that that it's impossible for them to get an 98 because of the disadvantaged communities. But here you have access to all of those points. Okay.
So the program challenges, so this touches on what Lori was discussing. So this is a very oversubscribed program. There's massive community need, but not enough funding. And some of the trends that we're noticing as of recently is that the funding requests are getting larger, but the pot of money is remaining the same, which is why even though we get, you know, augmentation like we did last cycle, we're not able to fund as many projects as we're hoping to, just because of the funding requests getting larger, costs going up. It's kind of a vicious cycle at this point. So another challenge is just ensuring that the program is open to all geographic areas across the state. So that's another reason why it's really important for all of the agencies that are interested in the active transportation program to continue staying involved through our central guidelines workshops process, so that if there are things that are affecting your specific region, it's voiced to the larger stakeholder group. Another challenge is the program funds all project phases. So because we are one of the active transportation funding sources that does fund pre-construction, we do see a lot of agencies coming in for those funds as well. And then the other challenge is measuring performance. This is something that we have been focusing more on these past 2 cycles. We have been utilizing the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Benefits Calculator tool to show some performance measures and metrics and overall program benefits. We're also working with our colleagues at Caltrans to ensure that agencies, as they're submitting their reporting on their projects, they're providing meaningful counts that we can utilize and speak to before and after counts after infrastructure is built. So this is something, these are all things that we're gonna hopefully continue working on so that they will no longer be challenges. Is there anything that I missed?
No, but I will say that even though we know the scoring cutoff is gonna be high, we hope that doesn't scare people off. And for a couple reasons. One is we will be funding some projects. So, you know, we do have some funding, so we will be funding some projects. The other thing is that this program is very well aligned with the administration's goals. So with lowering GHG and stuff like that. So we are continually trying to show the need. And if we have a major drop off in applications, it's gonna show there's less need. Not that we're using you just to show our need, but it'll help. And we are always hoping for either, well, to get more funds or continuing funds. But we can also get an augmentation. If we can show, look, we had all of these amazing projects and we couldn't fund very many. So we're always hoping that we can get that augmentation. And then it's works well for if the people that make these decisions decide to give us more money, because the program is there. It's been running for a while now. It runs well, so they can just put the funds into it. They don't have to start a new program or anything. So we want to keep showing that need, and we're always pushing along with a lot of stakeholders for funds for the program.
Oh, yeah. Was there anything that anyone wanted to touch on or bring up?
Just quickly,
Yeah.
so in unincorporated Tulare County, one of the areas that we lost the most points on was in the data for pedestrian and bike injuries. Like on one application, we lost 12 points just because we don't have the data, and part of it's because we have fewer residents, but then we would argue we have probably the most need. And so how to address that in the scoring, since we don't have the data to back it up, we can tell stories, but really it came down to like, you didn't show any official data that this is gonna prevent injuries or fatalities.
So with that, I would say you're not the only region that is facing that issue. What we did in the application, this was a concern that was raised to us in a previous cycle. What we did in the application in cycle 6 was we added a secondary attachment field to provide any sort of information that would support the safety concerns going on in your community. So if there's any sort of, like we've seen agencies hold workshops with their community members, and their community members will identify on a map areas that are concerning to them, or they've witnessed near misses or anything like that. So any sort of detail that you can provide to support your safety concern, I think that is a way that you can go around having no data to include. Another thing that I'm trying to remember other agencies I've seen do, they'll do some sort of surveying with their agencies. Others will use crowdsourcing platforms like Street Story. And I think there was one application last cycle I saw that actually utilized the platform Nextdoor, because someone had started a forum and was talking about a particular intersection where they had witnessed, a couple near misses and it involved students. And so they included photos of that intersection. They included direct quotes that people had provided through that forum. So anything like that, I think that will clearly show your safety concerns within that project area. One thing to keep in mind too, as Russ mentioned, photos speak volumes. So if you're having to point to your, I think it's attachment E, your existing photos, you can reference that in your narrative. So as the applicants are kind of looking through all of this supporting documentation that you've included, you can have them go to that specific attachment and they can see pedestrians or bicyclists doing unsafe things because of the lack of infrastructure or safe infrastructure. So there are a lot of ways to kind of work around that. And I think if you, if we're touring your project or if you'd like to chat more with us about ways that you can kind of address that question, that's where a site visit, whether it's in person or virtual, will be really helpful. We can definitely dive more into it.
A lot of our meetings here, the lady from the public health comes and gives us an update of pedestrian and bicycle fatalities.
Yeah, so basically for that question, you're not gonna get away from data. That's the one question that really has the most data basis to it. However, there's a lot of different kinds of data. If you don't have the CHP data, then like Alika was saying, and it's just thinking about if it's, you know, every parent in your community writes in and says, I'm not letting my kids walk around here because it's way too dangerous. So that is just as good, you know, so obviously you're not gonna have accident data because nobody's letting their kids walk around. So it's just thinking about what is the best way that you can have backup for what you're trying to show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just thought of another example. We did a site visit in a rural region and they're off of a state highway and they were trying to build infrastructure right near a school. And they didn't have any data to discuss in their safety questions. So what they did was they worked with their police department and the biggest issue there was high speed. And so they were able to work with CHP and provide data on like how many tickets for speeding they've given in that project area, and they use that instead of providing collision data. So doing things like that are, you know, maybe more outside of the box or creative, but you're still providing that data that will clearly show and support that safety concern that you're identifying.
TCAG highly recommends that you use street story application for a couple of different reasons. One is you need to be in the community anyways, finding out what their needs are and what their safety concerns are, but then that tool documents it. And then, so you're getting points on the public involvement side, and you're also gonna get points on the data side, safety data side. But then also the graphic, if you are doing engagement in your project area, you're gonna have all of these locations that are safety concerns, and then you're gonna put a crossing there, right? So you're gonna be able to communicate in your application that you went into the community, they told you where it was unsafe, and you tweaked your project or designed a project around what the community need is. And if you see that graphic, we did one in Exeter on 65, and you bring it up, you get all these dots that form a corridor on 65, right? And it's like ding, 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 that's where we need to do a project. And, but you've got it tied to the community, right?
Any other questions?
Bit of a tangent off of that is, does the CTC have information on countermeasure data in terms of how well it can say mitigate speed? This kind of goes back to the quality of the infrastructure as well. So if you have certainly near misses and data that indicates you need to do something, is there a database? There's certainly a national database that I have, but I'm wondering for something more California specific that can say certain countermeasures can actually perform this well in a particular circumstance or situation.
Do we reference them in the
I don't know that we do. I know, so part B of that question is really where we ask applicants to discuss that, the proven track records and providing that supporting documentation. Just off the top of my head, I know some applicants will work with Caltrans, and I think they have certain data points that you can pull from. I think others we've seen, they'll actually reference their own local projects as supporting data. So if they have implemented a project that addressed, a safety concern near a school, and they're proposing something similar, they'll reference that project and talk about, the decrease in collisions, the increase in safety, however they're able to show it. But I think I've mostly seen FHWA and Caltrans referenced.
But I'm glad that you said that, because we'll look and see if we can add, if there's anything else we can add to that for people to reference.
Yeah, 'cause I know like NACTO has data
Yeah.
on narrowing roadways,
Right.
reducing speeds.
I think we referenced NACTO, but we'll just check and see if that needs to be, if there needs to be more in that.
Also the ridership part too, in terms of the bike facility
Yeah.
application.
Questions? Okay, so jumping into highlights from the 2025 guidelines process so far. So at this point, we have finalized the program schedule. Actually, before I jump into this, I just want to make it clear the guidelines, workshop materials, recordings, everything is posted on the Commission's Active Transportation Program website. So if you are interested in learning more about these topics, our presentation slides and all of the workshop materials are available on our website. For these central workshops.
Where we make any revisions and stuff like that on the guidelines.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, the program schedule has been finalized. One big change that we're making to the application this cycle is that it will no longer be a PDF or Adobe document. It will all be through an online platform called Submittable. So this is new for the commission as well. We are still working on obtaining this contract, but we plan on holding a training and just getting our applicants comfortable with this platform. We'll also be incorporating the Justice 40 initiative this cycle. And we will also be providing new federal tools as DAC, disadvantaged community qualifiers, under question 1. We'll also be continuing the Quick Build program we'll also be continuing the Quick Build program and plan to hold a workshop, I believe, in November or December to bring it to the larger stakeholder group. So again, we encourage you all to participate in those workshops. And then we brought a couple of policy clarifications at the last workshop last week. And so again, those clarifications are clearly identified in the presentation. Did you want to add anything?
So basically, we're not changing much. Yeah. And the reason for that is that it's too hard for applicants to change things every cycle. And the only changes like the Justice 40 is because if there is something new that comes out that we have to adhere to, we have to do it. And the ATP is subject to Justice 40. But it shouldn't affect applicants very much because it's just meaning that 40% of the funds have to go to the federally disadvantaged communities, which is why we have the new federal tools. We're not gonna have any trouble meeting that, and we'll take care of making sure that that's taken care of on our end.
Now that we're submitting online, what we used to do is look at the PDF version of the application and kind of work off of that beforehand. Is that still gonna be a thing?
Well,
typically those types of grant applications, you can print from the online form, but it only shows the characters that are in the box that you can see. So what we typically do is use like a Word document to answer the question, especially the long answer questions, and then use that to circulate internally, because if you just print it from what you see in front of you, it doesn't capture all of the information.
Okay.
Every platform's a little different. Some let you print a PDF at the end, it's usually after submittal, it's not.
Yeah.
But that's a good question.
Yeah.
We can find out.
Yeah, just releasing the application maybe in PDF form, we're still doing
Yeah,
that.
we
And then
can still, and it's gonna look very similar, if not pretty much the same.
Yeah.
We're hoping this is gonna be easier, because that fillable PDF can be a big pain, so,
Yeah.
So,
you start
yeah,
typing
and-
and then it goes to the next one.
yeah, and then, the evaluators will be able to access it through this online system too, yeah, so, yeah, we needed to do this, it was getting to be too much of a hassle, so.
I will say, I know Beverly's mentioned in the past that you're able to export your application once it's been completed. So I'm wondering if we can check in with the submittable team to see if there's something that we can do on the back end and get that exported before it's completed, so that it'll at least be easier for all the applicants. Any other questions? Are there any questions online? Thanks for the reminder, Lori. I was just leaning on everyone to stop me. Okay. Well, feel free to chime in online. Okay. Now we will jump into the analyses. So bear with me here because I'll have to go off my notes a bit. Okay, so looking at Tulare County overall and the ATP. So across 6 cycles, the county has submitted, or not the county and agencies have submitted 142 projects. Of those, 32 have been funded, so that's about a 23% success rate. I would say about 20 to 35 is where we see most of our applicants fall. Tulare was on the lower end of this, I would say at the end of cycle 4. So to see them going into cycle 7, hitting the 20s is really great to see. Don't think that 23 is a small number. It's a good standing. Of those 32 projects, 10 were funded in the statewide component and 22 were funded through the MPO component. I'll pause here to see if there are any questions.
Do you guys recall, or can you touch on what the scores were like last cycle in the rural side? Like how high they were, or the, I know the cutoff will be different, but.
The cutoff, in the rural, smaller rural to get funded, I think was 78.
With augmentation.
Yeah, but it's gonna
It'll
be,
higher.
yeah, it might be 90.
I think it was in the 90s in cycle 5.
It was in the 90s, cycle 5, yes, for the small urban rural. Wow.
We need scores in the 90s.
Was it 90? I think it may have been a low 90 or an 89.
Yeah, maybe
Maybe it was an 89.
Stop there and get it done with a few times.
Like an
and
A
get it.
minus.
They need an A minus, right?
Yeah.
So, looking at the region in cycle 6, there were 19 applications that were submitted, and there were 7 that were funded. So that's about a 37% success rate just last cycle, which is great.
So that's really high.
That's really
Actually, for
high.
the ATP.
Yes. So 3 applications were funded in the statewide component, and I just want to take a second and just quick shout out. There were 2 applications that were from the statewide component that scored a 98. So those 2 applications came in 4th and 5th highest scores in the statewide component. And these are the highest scores ever from the Tulare County region, these 2 applications. Yeah, so big shout out to this region. There were 4 applications that were selected for funding in the MPO component. And 4 of the 7 successful applications held either a cycle 5 and or a cycle 6 site visit with us. So continuing, holding branch workshops, having these site visits, whether they're in person or virtual, make a difference. So if you have questions, concerns about your project, don't be afraid to reach out to us and ask. We are always here to help because it really does make a difference.
Are you allowed to share who the board of
Yeah,
ed
is anybody in this room?
Yeah, I think, well,
Houston
one of them must
project.
have been Porterville.
I believe so. I might lean on Beverly to double check for me.
Could,
And then it was in my same.
I think it was
I
like.
think it rhymes with Diego.
I said Houston project.
Yeah, so we'll share that, what those two projects were. Okay. So continuing on, all of the applications that were submitted qualified as disadvantaged communities. And 63% of those applications that were submitted received the full disadvantaged community location and severity points. So just a quick recap, the disadvantaged communities question is question 1. It's worth 10 points and it's broken out into 3 parts that are scored. There's 2 points that go to your disadvantaged community location. So if your project falls fully within a disadvantaged community, you get 2 points. If it's partially, you get 1 point. If it doesn't fall within a DAC, but it provides a benefit to a disadvantaged community, you receive 0 points. Severity is based on the disadvantaged community qualifier that you selected. We have a table within the application and within the scoring rubric and the guidelines that clearly outlines how many points are allotted for each of the disadvantaged community qualifiers. Depending on where you fall on the spectrum, you can receive between 0 and 4 points. The final part of the disadvantaged communities question is your direct benefit, where you focus on your narrative explaining how your project is benefiting a disadvantaged community. The reason I'm talking about all of this is that a lot of agencies aren't receiving the full points. So it's really great to see that in this region, so many of the projects are benefiting disadvantaged communities or receiving the full location and severity points. Looking across all of the applications, there were 19, so it's kind of hard to fully identify where the areas of opportunity are, but the safety and public participation questions were areas of strength. There were, I think, a handful of applications that actually got the full points on both of these questions, or at least one of them, which is a big shift from what we were seeing in cycle 4 when we initially started working with the region. So it's really great to see that these 2 questions that really focus on working and collaborating with your community and getting that feedback and engaging, you're scoring so much higher than you were in previous cycles. The need question lost the most points. With that said, the need question actually holds the bulk of the points in the applications. So this is something that we see consistent with a lot of regions where the need is where they're losing the majority of the points. But again, that's where we have the most points assigned.
Okay, so City of Visalia scored a 98 for Houston Community Connectivity Project. City of Dinubus also scored a 98 for building Dinuba's active transportation future. And that was, they got $13 million for that project. And Porterville scored a 94 for Hot Pedestrian Crossing Project. Those are some very high scores.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, any questions?
So how do you increase the needs? You just said that that's one of the.
Yeah, so,
points. How do you-
yeah, that's a great question. So the need is broken out into 2 parts. Part A is focused on talking about your project need, talking about increasing walking and biking, public health, and talking about students. Those are the main things that you want to make sure that you're talking about in the need question. So A is really focused on providing that detail And part B is how your project is going to address all of those needs that you've outlined in part A. And I think a lot of applicants will elaborate on what their project is doing in part B, but they don't link it to the need. They're not connecting to everything that's outlined. So in the need, you're gonna be talking about lack of connectivity within your community, lack of mobility, and then you're also identifying any sort of public local health concerns or health disparities that are taking place in your community. It's really important with the public health concerns to be really detailed and not just state, you know, we have an obesity issue or lung disease is a concern. You really want to provide supporting data. So we've seen some agencies will work with our local public health departments, some will work with regional clinics or hospitals to provide that data. And some will use online tools like HelloVirus or Healthy Places Index. All of that is totally acceptable. When you're talking about those public health concerns, make sure that you're linking it to your active transportation improvements and proposed improvements so that the evaluators get a clear idea of what is needed in your community. And one thing to remember is the way that the applications are distributed to evaluator teams, there's a high probability that your evaluator team doesn't know anything about your region or may not have even heard of it. So it's really your goal as an applicant to be as detailed as possible and provide as much community context, and just making sure that you're hitting every part of every question will really provide that added information so that they know what's going on in your community. When you're talking about these public health concerns, they can see a direct correlation between the concern and how your project is going to help address it. Another recommendation, not just for the need question, but in general, if you have not been utilizing our scoring rubrics as you're writing the application, we always recommend our applicants to do so. They're posted around shortly after the call for projects goes out. And these are exactly what the evaluators use when they're scoring your application. So if you're reading through and just ensuring that you're answering every part of every question, you're utilizing the word count to be as detailed as possible, you're increasing your chances of getting the maximum amount of points under each question.
So one of the most revealing things that happened when we were here last time is that when we were talking to all of you and the former yous and everything about Tulare County, we heard all about what goes on here. It was very, very, very interesting, you know, the agriculture and what Tulare County is all about. And so then we would ask, did you put all of that in your application? And they were like, no, and I'm like, why not? That's really interesting. But when you live here, and a lot of you maybe have lived here your whole life, you're not thinking about that, because you live it, you've lived it your whole life. You're not thinking that that you need to explain what Tulare County is like to other people that are going to be reviewing your application. Because I'll tell you, probably a lot of people have never heard of Dinuba. And so you need to tell them what it's all about. And so they were underselling their projects and the community. And we said, you cannot do that. When in an ATP application is not where you want to be modest at all. You need to talk about how great it is to live here and what you need your kids to be able to get to school safely. Or you really want people to be able to ride their bikes to get to work. But there's just not the facilities. So because the people that are evaluating your application, it's not gonna be Sheila, it's not gonna be Russ, it's gonna be somebody that lives in Mendocino County or somebody in LA, because we spread them out all over. So it's up to you to tell the story through your application. These projects are about community. And so you're talking about the community. The one, which was the one with the male? Viola, okay. But that's Fresno County, isn't it? Okay, so
Yeah,
there.
they actually came out here
we have
and
similar-
met with them in
Okay,
person.
okay. Yeah. Okay, so Viola, we talk about that one a lot because it really resonates with people, and what they explained in their application is that they don't get their mail delivered to their houses. They all have to go to the post office to get their mail. And, you know, they would like to be able to walk there. And so that was really, a lot of people that don't live in these, in the valley, they don't know that. And so they didn't realize that there's people that have to walk to go get their mail somewhere. So that project scored really high. And I think that they were really able to show the need and explain that what their community is like. So, and, you know, Russ mentioned the pictures, always the kids having to walk in the ditch. That's always those heartbreaking pictures that really help. So there is, when I say that it's possible that you can get all those questions, you can here, because these communities are exactly the communities that need these kinds of projects to build livability and to make their communities more accessible for everybody.
Should I give them a hint?
Yes, sure.
If you're talking about a school or a church or the post office, get that school principal or the superintendent or the postmaster to write you a little letter of support that backs up what you're saying. Or if you can get minutes of a PTA meeting, even if you have to go put the PTA meeting on yourself and you get 8 parents that can sign with an X because they don't, you know, that is gonna help you.
Yeah, one of the projects here, I can't remember which one it was too, that we learned that in this community, like a lot of communities here, the church, it wasn't just where the people would go to church service. Everything happened there. You know, every community meeting, every event happened at this church. It was the community center. And, you know, the community was small enough that people could walk there or ride their bikes there, but it wasn't safe at all. So, so just telling that story of, you know, we have this church that is our community center and we really want to get people to be able to safely get here.
No, thank you. That helped. It's jogging my memory of a
Yeah.
couple other comments, but we'll touch on it. Were there any other questions or? So we also wanted to highlight Tulare County's success. So in cycle 4, there were 19 applications that were submitted. The average score was about a 65. After cycle 4, that's when we started doing more intentional engagement with the region and came out here on our site visits and had our workshops. So after cycle 4, going into cycle 5, there were 18 applications that were submitted, but the average score went up to an 80. So it made a huge difference just continuing to be involved in the program, asking questions, reaching out to us for technical assistance. The region continued that effort leading into cycle 6. Again, 19 applications were submitted and the average score was an 84. So it's still continuing to go up, and as we mentioned earlier, we had those 2 projects that scored 4th and 5th on the statewide component. So staying involved really makes a difference, and let's see.
Yeah, that's why we're really glad that you're here, because we want to keep the momentum going for cycle 7. And it just means more work.
On this pace, we're gonna be up at 89.
I would hope so, yeah, that'd be awesome, we'd love to see that. Okay, so looking at scoring in the 90s. So the region hadn't scored in the 90s since cycle 2, and that was only 2 projects that scored a 91. There were 3 projects that scored a 90 or above in cycle 5, and that was 190 and 2 94s. And in cycle 6, we had 5 projects that scored 90 and above. There was 192, 193, 194, and the 2 98s. So we're seeing this region really come up in the program and be a lot more successful. So we really wanted to point that out and just flag it for you all, just in case if you weren't aware. I don't know if you have anything else to add. I'm just so happy for the No? Are there any questions or comments or?
I have a question. We have a infrastructure project, and we always think of adding a education component to it, so a non-infrastructure with it. Does that add to the project and allow it to score higher if we can't add that to it?
So that's a very good question. I would say if you are going to pursue adding in a non-infrastructure to your infrastructure project, make sure that you're clearly talking about what your non-infrastructure is going to do and link it to your infrastructure, to the infrastructure portion of your project. One thing that we noted, because that was something that we actually encouraged a lot of agencies to do, was to add that NI part to their infrastructure. They weren't talking about it in the application, and it actually ended up hurting them because they weren't addressing the questions to the full extent, or they weren't linking it to the project that they were proposing. So I think if you're able to do it and talk clearly about what the non-infrastructure portion is, I think it can be very successful and it can help your application.
Yeah, the issue with that is that you only have so many words you can use in your word count. So by incorporating, say, an educational component into there, you've already used up all your word to describe your infrastructure project. So it's difficult.
Yeah, so I know in previous applications, that's how it was structured, but I believe in cycle 5 or cycle 6, we ended up adding an additional field just for the non-infrastructure portion. So you do have that additional space where you don't have to compromise talking about the infrastructure portion of your project. And we plan on continuing that onto the submittable platform.
Any other questions?
And on submittable, there still will be those character counts as well for minutes.
I believe so.
But we can always increase them.
Yeah.
So that's what we talk about when we do the application workshop. That's one of the things that that we see, okay, the stakeholders want more space in this particular question to talk more about the project. So that's something we can always change. Yeah.
And I believe that workshop is scheduled for January 10th.
One of the comments I remember reading from a scorer on one of our applications, I don't remember which one, but thought it was kind of interesting. They were basically begging us to put citations in the body of the narrative over to maps, over to photos.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so think about it like you're doing a college paper and you want your professor to be able to quickly find what you're talking about. I think that's gonna be helpful. I think on one of them, they actually said, I was able to, after looking for many years, I was able to find this graphic that, made it all come together. So I think it's good advice to really put in citations throughout your narrative.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We've seen a couple that throughout their narrative, no matter what question they're talking about, if they want you to go look at a particular page of a document, they'll reference the attachment
And then they'll indicate what page number within that attachment they want you to look at, and that's totally fine to do, you know, if you're talking about kids crossing unsafely or, you know, and you have photographic evidence of that, you can say, go to attachment, whatever, on page 6, you'll see this photo, and then you're really using the attachment fields to complement the narrative portion of your application, which doing that really helps you tell the story, which just overall makes a better application.
That's why one reason it's so helpful to be an evaluator, because then you see it from that side and you're reading an application, you're like, I really wish I knew what this person was talking about and I could find their graphic that they're referencing. But, you know, I don't want to look through 500 pages.
Right.
On average, how many applications do the scorers score?
Depending on how many applications we receive overall, it's between 9 and 12, I believe.
Yeah, because these are all, most of the people that are the evaluators are from other agencies. So they're doing this on their, you know, if they're lucky, their agency is letting them do this on their work time. So it's a time commitment. So the easier that you can make it on the evaluator, the more kindly they will look towards you.
Do you need any more evaluation?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, so if you are interested in being an evaluator, please let us know. We would love to have you on. And I believe Beverly will be reaching out in the future as well to all of our stakeholders. So if you're already on our list, you'll be getting that.
It's usually one person from some sort of agency, the San Diego Department of Transportation person, and somebody from another part of the state that's civilian. So you get, and it's funny, this course, you won't even talk about it. A week later, you'll call in to the other person with 3 scores. Yeah, happens all the time.
If you follow the scoring rubrics, it's.
How much time did it take you, Russ? A long time, many days.
I scored some local.
Oh, yeah, I've helped these guys here.
But I think it was a pretty much different process as far as trying to.
Another thing that can be really helpful, especially if you're struggling with responding to a question, we always post all of the successful applications on our website at the end of each cycle. So I believe right now we have cycles 5 and 6 up on our website. You can take a look, you know, if you want to look at a successful project from your region, or if you're looking for a successful project that's maybe proposing something similar to what you're proposing, you can always pull those applications up, look at the attachments, and then look at how they're responding to some of the narrative questions and mirror that in your application as well. So that's always another resource out there.
We are working on it. I mean, can't totally promise it because it seems like a big ask, but Sheila's gonna rock this out. But we are trying to work on a template that would give sort of best practices advice for each section and tools to help you fill it out better. Not sure if you guys are interested in that or not, but we're thinking that's a good way the MPO can help.
Yeah.
So, you know, look for that in the coming months.
Yeah. Also, one of the reasons that the Central Coast is so successful is because they do not think of it as competing against each other. They work together to do well as a region. So, like your goal should be for Tulare County agencies would sweep the smaller and rural component. You know, so so they send their applications to each other in other agencies to read, and they score them before they get to us.
Wow.
So, and they're very well coordinated and it works really well. So, and the more that you can show a regional vision, that's gonna help you too. Cause it shows more benefit than, you know, small isolated projects. Not that there's
those are useful too, but the more that you can show a vision, the better. So if you all like each other, work together. And, you know, you're competing against LA and San Francisco, not each other.
Good advice.
Bike paths, not walls.
Yeah. We did, site visits, and I won't name this agency either, we did a bunch of site visits in one city that had various agencies in this one city, and they didn't know what each other was doing. And we were like, do you know that, and they have projects right in the same area, so they should have been working together so they could leverage all of those projects. They would all talk about all of those projects would help them to show the more overall benefits. They didn't even know because they compete against each other. And none of them got funded, didn't help them at all.
That's great advice. Obviously, being an MPO, we are trying to always think regionally. But we do have projects where we could do a better job of connecting them, right? Maybe between the city and the county. If I think about Visalia's Goshen Trail, how can we extend that to the community of Goshen? How can we add, if the county's thinking about projects in that community, that could be one big application potentially. There's other places in our region where that can be the case. I think that's what they're getting at. It's something to consider. Where, again, individually they might get in the 70s, but together they might get high 80s or 90 or something like that.
And now that this region has been more successful, if you're proposing new projects going into cycle 7 that will connect to successful ATP applications from prior cycles, make sure to mention that too, because it's showing that you're already investing in that regional network and you're just continuing to add on to it. That's a good point.
Thank you for mentioning.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Were there any other questions? I mean, we're gonna be opening it up. I think I have 1 or 2 more slides left. So quickly go through those. So I just wanted to point out, we have our next central workshop where we'll be talking about the guidelines scheduled for October 31st. So that's next Tuesday, and that's from 1 to 4 p.m. We will be sending out the registration link to either today or tomorrow. And we will be encouraging attendees to dress up for the Halloween holiday, and there may or may not be some fun activities.
Do we get extra points on our application?
Unfortunately, no, no. But you get extra points from CTC, not on your application. And then this is our contact information. I'll make sure to share this presentation with Sheila, so that way she can share it with everyone here in this group. And then we'll likely also be posting this on our website as well.
I also have it all printed out on there's a save the date at the top, so if you want a printed copy of their emails and to get onto their email list, so you can ask questions, get a printed one.
Thank you, Sheila.
Where's the workshop located? Tuesday.
It's gonna be held virtually.
Oh, virtual.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it'll be through a Zoom meeting link, because we wanna see all the costumes. It will be held virtually and we'll send out the meeting link and post it on our website. Okay, so I early. This is kind of where we'd like to open it up to you all, and see if there are any other questions that you guys have.
No, the one is obviously like outreach or community outreach. How do you guys feel about like Facebook or social media campaigns to solicit feedback? Do you feel like that holds merit or any weight?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of agencies do that. A lot of it started during the pandemic. And I will say, we still saw a lot of agencies doing that in cycle 6.
You mentioned Nextdoor app.
Yeah, so if you're doing something virtual, I
I think it's important to explain why.
Yeah.
So if you're, you know your community, so if they're working 2 jobs, you know, they don't have time to come to workshops during, you know, regular work hours, but they are available, you know, in a virtual setting, you know, whatever the reason may be, make sure to point that out so that it doesn't seem like you're doing virtual engagement because you didn't want to hold anything in person. You're doing it because of the community.
Okay, so in person though will always be for outreach.
Or you could do a combination of
both.
both, yeah, or, you know, if your community is just more comfortable virtual, then that's totally acceptable. I would just encourage you, if you're doing something online, make sure that you're getting as much input from your community members as you can throughout that process, so that it feels like engagement and not outreach. You're getting input from them, you're gathering feedback, they're involved in the project process, and it's not just you bringing the project to the table, this is what we're proposing, yay or nay, you know? You're getting more of their involvement and feedback, yes, exactly.
So, yeah, exactly what Alika said, you know your community, and if you put in your application, if I hold a community meeting, 2 people show up, but if I do a virtual meeting and I get 100 people, then you know what's gonna work better for you.
Say you did a workshop a couple of years ago, everything applies. Do you take a stake in that? Because sometimes, let's say we go out and hold another workshop and everyone's gonna be anticipating the projects, and then pretty soon they'll stop coming. It's happened at other communities where you keep on going back to. Is there a date on the input that comes in, or if they said it 3 years ago that, hey, we need sidewalks, bikes, and nothing's been done, is that still valid?
Yeah, we've actually gotten this question before. So in terms of the engagement, if your engagement has, you know, workshops, whatever, is a couple years old, we usually encourage the agencies to maybe do one other event, whether it's virtual or in person, just to do like a check-in with the community. It doesn't have to be as extensive of an engagement event, but just doing like a touch base and making sure that the project is still a priority for the community. Because we also do recognize, you know, if you're applying for this project, it's your 3rd cycle applying, you have now been engaging your community for a few years, and they're probably tired of hearing about how you really want to do this project, and they're gonna stop showing up. So that's where we've seen a lot of the virtual engagement come into play, or just doing, you know, canvassing door to door, or just conducting a poll, or, you know, anything like that that you can do to really show your community is still really wanting this project. I think that would be helpful.
To your point regarding social media, we had a parent activist group that started a social media campaign on Facebook showing how unsafe the crosswalk was across 65 to the high school. And they had all kinds of pictures, and this was brought to my attention after we'd actually started the project, but I was able to take those pictures and quotes and send them to my project manager. So that was really helpful.
One way to think about the public involvement, so they indicated we've been actually scoring pretty high in that particular category, right?
Yeah.
But we're also talking about letting the community sort of help design the project, or using feedback to help design it. So what that'll help you with is connecting your need, right, to the project. So if you do community involvement correctly, and you use a tool like Street Story, well, you're getting your community involvement points, you're gonna get safety points, and then you're gonna be able to get a higher score connecting your need, right, to your project. You need to start thinking about it like that. I wish we could even step back and go, we don't have a project, right? And we think about how can we connect to the community, and then we go out to the community and ask them, and then build a project, right? Like, I'm not gonna name any names, but somebody mentioned a project the other day, and I'm looking at it and be like, that would be an awesome project. But then I was struggling to see how that helped a disadvantaged community, for instance, or how it connected to other aspects of the community or whatnot. So you know, there is nothing wrong with the project, but in a competitive environment, you've got to touch on many more things than just the benefit of the actual pavement, if it's a trail or whatnot.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, if you've already done engagement, let's say 3 years ago, and you just wanna do a touch base, you don't necessarily have to hold something where your community has to come to you, you can also go to them. So if you're, you know, the city is holding like a community type event, and it's already scheduled, you know, a lot of your community members or community leaders are gonna be there, you can also go to them and start canvassing there, or just hold a booth and ask them to take 2 seconds to identify an area of concern. And we've also seen some, you know, that will go straight to kids if it's a safe routes to school project, or they know it's a community that has a high population of children. They'll go directly to the kids instead of going to the parents, because they've already heard from the parents for a few years now. So now they're working with the kids, now that the kids wanna walk and bike and be outside, they're involved, they're drawing photos similar to these, you know, or they're you know, just providing any sort of insight or feedback that they have. So you can kind of be creative with that as well, and that's where looking at other regions' applications, the successful ones can come in handy, because you're seeing different ways, different parts of the state addressing, you know, similar types of issues that they're facing.
And our letters of support, is it the more the merrier? Like even if it's just a template, blanket letter, same letter of support, same wording, everything, just signed by 5 different people. Is it quantity that you guys look at, or more quality?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Okay. So, well, we get ones that are from like legislators, or, you know, that's always,
Yeah, sometimes if you, even something like, they'll have coffee with a cop or something, and they may be talking about bike safety, they have those around just some Wednesday morning or something, or coffee with the mayor, things like that. Even a little spiel at a city council meeting with a couple people in a row.
Is it better to have the letter indicating the project or the need rather than a generic?
Probably the need.
Yeah. So it's demonstrating the need.
We think that the Houston, the Visalia project, it had a PTA letter, right? We think that was one of the reasons it scored so high. Right.
We also engage in children directly.
Yeah.
I want to mention, there are gonna be some projects Bike Club comment on more than others, but we're happy to, if we think we know the area and what the issue is. Jaeger just did a great piece with Valley Voice where we're going to do a protected intersection. And sent the TV, 300 people bike clubbing on this. And we have some other tools too. So, and we've written letters for a couple of different things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually coming up more and more. People are looking for involvement with the community-based organizations. So get your bike clubs, your walk clubs, or whoever, get them involved, because that's showing that you really have that community support.
For the letters of support that are more just like a standard template, one thing I would recommend is if instead of having all of your community members sign the same letter that says the same thing.
That's kind of one.
You could say, you know, collectively, this many of the community members wrote this letter and they all signed it, so that you're actually putting a number instead of having the evaluators and, you know, going through like 300 pages of the same thing, but they wanna see who's, you know, signing these letters. Or another way you could do is you could just make the template open-ended for them to complete part of it. So, you know, we support this project because of, and then leave a blank for them to fill out, so that at least you're setting them up to write out the letter, but you're not actually
it's not the same thing, not everyone's gonna submit the same letter.
The Safe Routes to School project, if we're looking at a school that it's adjacent, say a high school, but the elementary school that we're focusing on is more disadvantaged. We're also trying to look at a project that has a larger, broader scope. I guess the overlap with not as disadvantaged school would probably hurt the application. It would have to, we have to kind of include both DAC qualifiers.
So if you're using for your reduced price school meals, you would have to include all of the schools, I believe, within a 2-mile radius. But then you can focus on that one elementary school in the narrative portion, but make sure that you're talking about why. You can also, if the high school already has infrastructure in place and you're just looking to expand on this one elementary school, you can kind of talk about that.
I think again,
Wait, what do you?
All of the schools have that.
Yeah.
yeah, it's for metric control that we
Yeah.
really use because it's
So you
like
can
state
still
like
use it as a DAC.
Okay.
I think they would still have to use it.
Okay.
Questions? Are there any questions online? Well, thank you all so much. We'll stay here for some time since we plan to be here until 4. But thank you all so much, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
We'll add this, like, to the site visit.